OOCS into a wider galaxy, part 196, the buzz on the spin. And a pair of hoagies for a pair of hungry men. Now, Daniel, you're being an example for the young man. I know, don't just inhale it. Savor it, Hoagie says, and his mother nods, even as Zachariah stares at the piled, high sandwich on the plate in front of him. It's big, the little man exclaims as he looks over the ham, turkey, and beef hoagie. Plenty big, Janet agrees. Don't worry about finishing it. Eat until you've had enough. Okay. Just remember to have a good bit of the green stuff and the meat. Don't fill up on the bread, Hoagie says. Growing Finsara need plenty of both. I thought we're called Finsara, Janet asks. Finsara, I'm not sure how, but I can hear the difference in the identical words. And I think you're right, it's Finsara. It is, I'm a Finsara, Zach says. Little touches make things, don't they? Hoagie asks as Zach pulls out some of the lettuce from his sandwich and eats it to try the taste. He then pauses as a large figure opens the door. Gantrith, how did the investigation go? Hoagie asks his right hand, who currently looks like an empty semi-formal suit walking around. I can confirm most of it. The Gulwins are grieving the semi-recent loss of one of their members. They are known to follow the continuum, and there are several very odd laws in system related to child abandonment and the like. Potentially a way someone can legally attack or smear the family in a way that's both indirect and audacious as it comes. They're also known to overreact to clones of the dead. Zach says, you don't need to worry. Whatever happens, you're coming out the other side just fine. I promise, Hoagie says. Is this overreaction born of faith, culture, or a familial tradition? All of the above, it seems. Right. Ask a stupid question and all that, Hoagie mutters. Sit down, Mr. Fierce, Janet says, and the enormous man settles onto a stool facing them both. Are you cloaking? Zach asks after a short while of staring at Gantrith. Partially, Gantrith answers. I can't really tell who's up to this sort of silliness. The woman who was bringing you here to a buyer was a middlewoman, someone who didn't know what was going on and only involved so far as she could be trusted to carry you. The case you were brought in was made by one company that has nothing to do with cloning. No cloning company will admit to illegally cloning the child of a wealthy family and the probable destination. Makes this all some poorly thought out plan designed to hurt people and not really thinking things through. Any questions? Hoagie asks Zach, who thinks. If he's so much bigger than you, then why are you the boss of him? The child asks, and Hoagie chuckles. Not all power is due to being bigger or stronger. Not to mention there's the important part about experience and what you know. Size doesn't matter at all for those things, and they're both really important. I guess. So what were they trying to do with me? Dead is dead, right? If I'm a clone, I can't be the original person. A clone is a copy, right? Different from the moment it's done. That's right. But the galaxy is a big place, meaning you can find places where normal rules don't work right. And a place has been found where that rule can be bent. Of course, it's a lot more complicated than that, and it's not easy to do anything like that. But it is doable. So I could become Arteran? Probably not. If Arteran doesn't want it to happen, and he won't, Gantrith says, then it's pretty much impossible, even with the rules in a bendy state, Hoagie finishes. So the bigger worry is, who do you want to be? Just like that? It's impossible? Zach asks. No, but it's going to be so hard to do that there's just about anything else they can do that's easier or smarter, Hoagie says. I mean, if they could bring back the dead, it would be a pretty big insult to people that follow the continuum. But it's not happening for a huge number of reasons. Like what? Well, the system they're going to, one of them named Lacron, has a whole bunch of primals around. Do you know what those are? Two meanings. One is a primitive state of things, and the other is a powerful state of things. The word primal Nagasha comes into my head. Yeah, primal Nagasha are the most powerful Nagasha. Often the most important on any planet they're on too. And most of them are headed to that one world, and all the people that follow them because they understand them as important, which means that there are a whole heck of a lot of ships there. Meaning going there without someone seeing something is up is pretty much impossible, short of an actual miracle. Maybe they were hoping just getting close enough would be enough, Gantrith suggests. By blood, if nothing else, Hoagie says. So, I only exist because someone wanted to hurt someone? That's awful. That's just the way it happens sometimes. But here's the important thing. You can choose. It's your choice what you do with what you have. Bad things can drag you down, or bad things can make you stronger. It's your choice. It doesn't sound like a good choice, Zach says, and Hoagie shrugs. Life is like that sometimes. I'm sorry you had to learn this part so early, Hoagie says. Observer Wu finishes his conversation with the AKA woman as he finishes writing out his notes before putting his arms back into the slots for the walking sub's arms. He looks towards Harold and nods. I have seen enough of this sector. I will be examining a few more sectors, particularly Sector 7's unusual plant life, and then speaking to the station staff. Got it. Do you want us nearby just in case? Or are we free to bounce around the station? Keep your communicator on, otherwise my guards should suffice outside this sector, Observer Wu says, and Harold looks to the side to the other men in walking subs. With that armor on, they're pretty much set already. Get some big guns in their hands, and you'll need some serious power to get through them. The type that you need someone with serious training, an earned reputation, or excessive firepower. Excessive by what standard? Normal security standards, which to be granted is the kind of thing I carry by the dozens, Harold says. Now, that. Observer Wu turns and sees the airlock to Sector 8 open, and the force field keep the water off a very tall alien woman, one of the still unnamed species, out in the open and watching them. Well then, let's see what she wants, Juria says as the crowd moves together. The alien looks around and her gaze lingers on Snarlmane. You know, you sharing the same last name as the Lopen who attacked this station some months ago made my report all the more annoying to write. Velocity notes with her hands in her pockets. She openly has 4 different types of pistol on her, armor visible on the outside of her outfit, and a comfortable jacket over the armor. The pale pink scaled woman nods to them all when they're close. I have to say, I didn't expect that there would ever actually be permission for me to release information on my own people and myself. Well, do you want me to activate the scramblers I have on me before we begin to talk? Yes, she says after a pause that does not go unnoticed. All right, Harold says and pulls out a device he turns on. There is a slight keening buzz just at the edge of hearing. Uma outright flinches at it. I'm going to go chase fish, Uma says before bounding away. Try not to start a riot, Juria calls after her. Or if you do, make sure you have someone take the fall for you, Harold adds in unhelpfully. He then turns back to Velocity. So, are we getting an actual name for you, or are you still going by Velocity? It'll work for now. Personal details are to be released at my own discretion. Velocity replies, Very well then. I am a human from planet Earth, deep inside and near the center of cruel space. I am Wu, my rank is Observer, and we humans are classified as bipedal mammalian omnivores, 100 to 100. Whom and what am I addressing? And from where do you hail? He asked with a slight bow and one large mechanical hand over his chest. In some ways, I am an observer as well. I am Captain Velocity. As you can imagine, my stealth craft is a great deal smaller and harder to notice than your own. You'd have to be blind and deaf to avoid seeing the inevitable, Wu says. We call ourselves the Vishanyan. We are a BRO species, bipedal reptilian omnivores. And as you can tell at a glance, we have very fetching long necks with lovely hoods. And your homeworld's location is still secret, isn't it? Harold asks. It is. Fair enough. You know, the observer here is from inside cruel space, which may as well be in another galaxy entirely for how accessible it is for most, Harold remarks as he walks up and into the air bubble. You're lacking armor on the back. It may be uncomfortable, but if you're afraid of some coward trying to be cute, you're going to need armor for your back. I've got this, Velocity says, fingering a little bit of Kutha in her shirt collar. That keeps your neck and head safe and is a very good thing to have, but your back is wide open from shoulder blades down to waist. I can see right behind me, turning as quick, and armor is suddenly in place. She says, I suppose. He says, so bipedal reptilian omnivores. Are those little axiom markings just under the skin the source of your stealth? They're damn near identical to primal markings. Oh? Have you seen primal Nagasha up close and personal? Jiria there is descendant of Thessalia, one of the great ladies of war. Harold says, and Jiria makes a kissing motion that's halfway between friendly and threatening. So the data is accurate. You've personally dueled with a primal Nagasha, a war goddess no less. Velocity says to him. He did, multiple times no less. Earned grandmother's full approval, Jiria says. I take it that whatever reason you were so shy earlier is something you're not allowed to share with us, Harold asks. It is, she says. Care to hear what I've guessed so far? Harold asks. I suppose that I should hear about what other answers you've plucked out of dark places between starts again. You're an artificial species based off of primal Nagasha. That's the hood. It's enormous on you, but on one of them it would be a perfect fit, Harold says, and Velocity goes very, very still. Goddess, damn it, Velocity says. How? Jiria is the most experienced with primal Nagasha here, and she's on edge around you. She's recognizing the distorted but still familiar markings. Velocity sighs. And your refusal to give us even a basic male-to-female ratio in your species means that something is odd and off about it, and you haven't any thought to practice a lie ahead of time, merely avoid giving the information, which means it can go in many directions. You might have a massive number of males, but I'll put my money on there being no recorded Vishanian males. Couple that with an obvious discomfort and lack of protocol for situations like this, and in the last century at the most, your species was created by an outside party as some kind of super weapon program, likely as assassins and invisible soldiers. You broke free and are desperate for your own space and resources, meaning your likely homeworld is near Sobenrid, near enough that you want the Apuk there confused and unable to find you, even by accident. How do you know this? I didn't know anything for certain, but seeing you wince as I told you my educated guesses gave me a lot of answers, he says before grinning. And for the coup de grace, you and your people have only decided to reveal yourself to the undaunted because the leaders and masters of our organization are too young to have done you wrong. Nice. I have to trust that the council understood you would do this, and am going to just go through with this. My orders are to observe you further and report back, so you better believe I've been recording this nightmare conversation. I expect you to, and again as a personal message from me. If the Vishanian want help, we are willing to help you. But the question is always the cost. True, but that leads to another question. And that would be? Can you afford to refuse help? I don't know, and if I did, it wouldn't be up to me to decide. OOCS Into a Wider Galaxy, Part 197, The Buzz on the Spin, 4, 8 now, 6, 2, 1, 3, 5, Zachariah says, as Janet holds up fingers for him to see without using the eyes in his head. That is very neat, young man. You're like an actual angel. Yeah, he's got wings after all, Hoagie says. No, as in the actual descriptions in the Bible. Many angels have far more eyes than you'd think. Our little friend here is biblically accurate. To an extent, Janet says before ruffling up Zach's hair a little. He's too cute to be fully accurate, though. She then looks up as an enormous figure, smaller only than the gigantic Gantrith walks in. Miss Fallows' expression is sad and conflicted. Bad news? Hoagie asks. This isn't what I wanted. The Gullwins aren't, Miss Fallows says. Not handling it well, Hoagie says before looking at Zachariah. The child looks a strange combination of hurt, relieved, and confused, as if he had no idea what he himself wanted out of the situation. They haven't said anything specific, but they're really not dealing with this well, Miss Fallows says before taking a deep breath. Your people are herbivores, right? Janet asks, and Miss Fallows gives her an odd look. My son interrupted your meal. I may as well make up for it. Mom, you don't have to. And some comfort food to help deal with the situation rarely goes awry. Janet continues as if she didn't hear him. Do you have a favorite ingredient? Tallet berries. Oh, the local cherry tomatoes. We have plenty. A big salad with them as a primary ingredient is just the thing, Janet says as Miss Fallows walks in further and slumps into the seat next to Zachariah. She turns to him and opens her mouth to speak, but nothing emerges. She then looks away with a huff before turning back. I'm sorry. For what? Zach asks. Everything is going wrong is what? The Gullwins are still grieving, and this is a knife to the wounds, so they're not acting like they normally do. I wanted to keep you in stasis until everyone was ready to deal with things. I don't even fully know who thought this was a good idea. About that, mind explaining it in more detail? Hoagie asks. You need to understand this has been the weirdest and most emotionally trying 3 weeks of my life. First, Artaran's kidnapped. Then there's something going wrong in their handling of him, and he dies. We put a huge hit on the monsters that did it, and then only a few days after confirmation, and we finally let ourselves grieve. I get a message, threatening the Gullwins and demanding a huge fee, saying that unless we want our wounds torn so wide that a ship can fly inside, that I need to pay my weight in Axiom Ride. Is that the exact phrasing? Hoagie asks. It is. Very odd. In galactic trade, in Malendar it's a very powerful and almost elegant threat, with a lot of cultural reference to old Agala villains and older crimes. We may have a well-earned reputation for being even-tempered and patient, but every people has its problems. Understood. I'm not sure you do. Threatening to open wide fresh wounds is a very heavy threat, and it's so many things at once that I literally cannot properly explain it in galactic trade without going on a massive tangent that would not only includes a great deal of modern and classical culture, but also evolutionary tricks for my kind. It goes back to when we were barely more than animals. But I digress. I was threatened very seriously and in a way that speaks to my people. Meaning it was either someone who was taking their time to make it personal or another Agala. Or someone familiar with our kind. But yes, Miss Fallows says before Janet returns with a small bowl. A sampler for the ingredients you might not be familiar with. Feta cheese works great in tomato salads, but I'm not sure if it's to your taste, Janet says, and Miss Fallows takes the small bowl from her and smiles as Janet hands her a spoon as well. She takes a bite of the salad and then promptly downs the entire thing. That's a yes. A big yes, that's a lot of flavor. How did you do that? By using more than a few ingredients that lets you have most of the flavor and none of the danger of human cuisine, Hoagie says with a proud smile. Mom's a bit of a genius that way. Don't talk me up now. She might find the flavor shine wearing off in a hurry. Janet says, mangling her metaphor badly. Anyways, yes, please. If you intend to flavor the salad with that, then it would be amazing to have, especially as someone interrupted my meal. I saved you a lot of money. Did you see the prices on those meals? Nearly no substance to them, and at such an insane price markup, you could buy 100 times the amount in raw ingredients. It was about more than the food you created, Miss Fallows remarks. You're right. It was about the straight answer I needed that you did not give me after there had been a murder on the station. One Miss Derica Courier, and it tied directly to you, and I still have people tracing her steps backwards to see whether she was responsible for anything or just a courier for some reason. What do you mean for some reason? There is nothing in her records we could find for why she would have Zachariah or be transporting him. It's all blank. There is no connection. But it goes right back to her. She died to protect something that she by all rights should not have been associated with in the slightest. There are gaps in this story big enough for me to walk clean through without brushing the sides, even with my arms open wide. I was soon to begin my investigations after a bracing meal to calm myself. But you got in the way of that, Miss Fellows says, and Hoagie shrugs. Again, you should have been straight with me. We would have come to this point a lot quicker and with a lot less hassle on everyone's side. Choking on pride is still choking, Hoagie says sternly. Now I'm going to bring this investigation into two directions. Since the family is clearly not ready to interact with Zach, but you are, I'm going to treat you as the boy's parent and working with you to discover everything about him that is possible. Is this acceptable? Do you also have issues? I do, but I'm pushing it down and away because Zachariah is not the guilty party. Even you're not the guilty part. According to Miss Shodden, you did not wake up Zachariah. You found him already awake, meaning that there was likely a time release on the stasis device. You didn't deactivate it? Hoagie asks. I did not. But you had the room sealed off from the others for the trip. I thought I would be potentially dragging someone back to make an example of. Not fully legal, and the less of my crew knowing about that, the less chance I have to get in trouble for it. Oh, that makes a great deal more sense. Doesn't help with the investigations. but makes sense. So are you going to release my ship? No. Why not? Because you could be entirely full of... Hoagie cuts himself off as he looks to Zachariah. Nonsense. And I am taking this situation very seriously. No one's going anywhere until I know what's going on, or at least understand that things are going to end at least somewhat well. Then how are you going to let things end? What's your plan? Well, there are three options depending on what's going on, at least as far as Zach is concerned. Option 1 has him be taken in but the Goldwins, but that's provided they don't do anything stupid and can get over their shock in the situation. The second one is he goes with you as his adoptive parent, but that only happens if I can dig deep enough to be absolutely sure your relationship with the Goldwyn is as you say it is, and that you have his best intentions in mind, beyond just helping the Goldwyns as you imply to be doing. Option 3 is I use my contacts and resources as an undaunted to find him an adoptive home well away from this station and its charming life. You're a major power on this station, Fallows reminds him. And he has a family here, Janet calls from the kitchen. And all my children are safe in their hive, a structure so powerful and reinforced that if the station was blasted to pieces, the hive would not only survive, but be in a perfect position to build a new station around itself. Zachariah doesn't have a hive to keep him safe. The sooner he's off the station and with a loving family, the better. Hoagie says, and Miss Fallows just stars at him for a moment. You're really not what people think of when they hear of stations like this. Life is more complicated than stereotypes and assumptions allow. Who'd have thunk it? All right, fine. You have my full cooperation. What do you need to know and how do I prove it to your satisfaction? Miss Fallows asks just as her salad arrives. After this. I'm still hungry and this is good food. Thank you, ma'am, Janet says slightly smugly. I must admit, I should have seen this coming, Observer Wu says as he glances over at the surprisingly friendly scene his investigation has turned into. Harold is helping Isma's daughter Giselle go over how to maintain and upgrade a grenade launcher, as Snarlmane looks to incorporate one into her armor. The words of variable payload had been used several times. Some say hindsight is flawless. I disagree as we can easily misremember things. But it is clearer than the moment-to-moment affairs of living. Isma notes as she brings out another image. Now, this species, the Vaurine, have a surprisingly robust culture considering how early in their development they were uplifted. They were just shy of metalworking and were at the stage where skilled stone knapping, pottery, and weaving were the bleeding edges of technology. From my understanding, they were also getting pretty good at navigating with the stars as well. No written language yet, but numerous tribal tongues. I imagine this had all sorts of effects on their people. Oh, no doubt. It took a couple generations to break their little habit of worshipping the star people. Breaking the Shriketalons and having them swear an oath of peace didn't help in that regard. Shriketalons? An extremely aggressive tribe. Bad luck had convinced them that the gods demanded blood, and they were dead set on making sure it was the blood of other tribes and not their own. Didn't win them many friends, but their descendants hold to those same oaths today and are considered some of the gentlest, most reasonable, and personable of all Valrin. Which is why our eventual stop at Zalwar will be interesting. We have not only a Shriketalon enclave nearby, but we have an exception to the Shriketalon pacifism enlisted there as ship captain. You do? Isma asks. Yep, Captain Jacob Shriketalon. An absolute whirlwind of munitions and talons in a fight. At least, I think he is. It's a bit of info I remember from Herbert, so it might be scrambled. I haven't confirmed this tidbit yet, Harold admits. Why not? Giselle asks him. Haven't gotten around to it. There's so much I'm making sure isn't some insane hallucination from Herbert's memories, and that shotgun blast of info I got from the assisting adepts, that the quick scan over Jacob's backstory and recruitment is pretty low on my priority list. And what's at the top? Well, top was making sure that my knowledge of Herbert being all right with me wasn't a hallucination, and he wasn't going to shoot me on sight. After that was the fact that he did in fact have so many wives and children and just, Harold begins before sighing. I have a lot of lovely nieces and many more adorable nephews. Thankfully, it hurts a heck of a lot less to think about them now. And what's your high priority now? Giselle asks. I have dozens, if not hundreds of weird axiom techniques that are incomplete or just odd. I'm slowly going through all of them to see if they're real and if they work. Things are going slowly. You're not asking for help? I do, but then I get reminded about the gaps in my knowledge when they start quoting everything at me and making up more while trying to pass it off as a quote. And that's when they're not speaking to me in Portuguese for some reason. I'm not South American. I can barely recognize Portuguese when it's spoken to me. Then why are they doing it? Giselle asks in a baffled tone. Apparently to honor my heritage. I don't know. The Jamesons are European and American, not South American. That doesn't make sense. No, it doesn't. Then they act like I'm the crazy one and ask if my memory's broken or a truth going unspoken. Some even as if I've forgotten my name. What? I don't know. It doesn't make any sense. OOCS, Into a Wider Galaxy, Part 198. The buzz on the spin. The knife hand comes for him and he bats it to the side. The mild toxins in Giselle's nails was considered a losing condition for the little spar. So what is it about explosions that you like so much? The suddenness, the sound, the sensation, or just the sheer contrast to normal hunting techniques? I can't really say. I just know that once they start going off, some part of me is laughing, and half the time I don't know if it's in mania or sheer joy. Giselle says as she starts trying to kick him in a spinning pattern to bring her toenails into the equation. But he keeps slapping away the top of the foot and interrupting the spin. Stop it! Then stop fighting like you're dancing and fight, Harold replies and she dives at him. To her surprise, he falls backwards, and rather than dodge normally, and his feet are planted in her stomach to send her sailing upwards and away. She lands on the soft moss a good 6 paces distance. He hadn't used even a flicker of axiom for that. Just refined skill and training. That wasn't fair, Giselle protests. It was very fair, and that's why it upsets you, dear girl. Yzma calls out, despite the fact that both of them are well and truly in her blind spot, and she has not moved her head in the slightest to look at them. And how I did that Mr. Wu was with axiom sensing. Harold might not be actively use axiom at the moment, but his presence within the axiom gives a very slight impression. Enough to track if you know what you're looking for. I see, Observer Wu says before giving Yzma a look. I've noticed that you have had at least one, often 3 to 4 children of every species that the Undaunted have reported encountering. But there is a noted exception. Ah, yes, them. Do you feel up to speaking about the tree? From what I understand, they are a sensitive topic, Observer Wu states. I'm surprised you're bringing this up to me. Well, I have been hoping to speak to other far-seeing individuals, but the religious aspects surrounding the primals and the fact that the Empress of the OOCS is the representative of an entire species. But you yourself are also a long-viewing individual that has influenced much of the galaxy. So I'm rather curious about this species labeled as anomalous in the reports. The tree are a tragedy, as is the situation surrounding them. To summarize, they are a well-intentioned and good-hearted people, with one of the most potent anti-axiom defenses in the galaxy. One so potent that the more a species uses axiom, the more objectively terrifying they seem. The fear is rational and reasonable, but always taken to an extreme. And what of defense is this? Essentially, their mere presence acts in a manner similar to null. They scramble the axiom they touch and shred any axiom construct on contact. And as almost every species is utterly reliant on axiom to merely keep alive, something that disrupts it on contact would have the touch of death. Yes, thankfully it's not an immediate death, but I have interacted with them before. I was cordial and polite, but merely being well-mannered around them was one of the most terrifying things I have ever undergone. You need to understand, I have hunted all manner of creatures in all manner of environments. There are some beings that can only be found in the gravitational wells of black holes, creatures that produce so much radiation that they can be detected on the opposite side of the planet with a Geiger counter. The big 4 I brought Herbert on were master-level hunting targets, but not master-level ones. A tree-eye's mere presence is so terrifying that it's akin to bringing a small child to their first hunt against a grandmaster-level hunting target. For something so terrifying, you speak of it quite calmly. That's part of the tragedy of the tree when they're not near you. When you know they're not there, you can think rationally and realize you've treated them incredibly unfairly. If not for their defenses, they would be a beloved species the galaxy over. They are small, they are friendly, curious, and careful. A joy to be around. Then you're actually around them and your every instinct starts screaming at you. There's more to the tragedy, isn't there? Sometimes the fear settles in someone's soul, and there have been purges. Not of the Tri themselves, but of other parallel evolutions. It's like some species being terrified of Alfar, Tret, or humans, and deciding to declare war on furless bipedal mammals, meaning other similar species have not been given a chance to evolve. Yes, there are some groups that attempt to conserve them, but generally these creatures are only discovered after the area is already valued for some kind of interesting hunt. After all, no species evolves the ability to resist axiom to such a degree without something pressuring them to do so. Isma says, have you ever participated in any such hunt? No. I will admit that the last time I spoke to a tree, I lashed out. The greater one's instincts, the more dangerous you are to a tree, and the harder they are to ignore. I avoid them because I don't want to hurt them. But many, many times I've heard of a new hunting target to find out that they had some kind of prey animal that has begun to resist axiom and then learn that some lunatic purged them. Is it really lunacy when their touch is death and their presence is fear itself? It is when even the slightest amount of caution and reason can keep you safe. It takes prolonged contact for a tree eye to actually hurt any species beyond a Grovia. And Grovia are so aware of the potential danger that they stay away. Yes, there are problems, but it doesn't deserve death, Isma says, and Observer Wu nods. Right. I apologize if I seem pushy for a moment. I needed to know for certain. The tree are the least, well, calling it human-looking doesn't really work considering that there are a great many older races than our own we resemble, but I understand entirely. It has something to do with the resistance to axiom, or so it was assumed. What changed that assumption? Humans. You've evolved in cruel space, meaning that tree and other species, like themselves, are different for different reasons. Null is one of the greatest resistances to axiom, rivaled only by the scrambling effect of the tree and tritite, which outright ignores pure axiom effects, requiring the energy to be transformed into a kinetic, thermal, or other energy type to affect it. Are you implying the tree are somehow not immune to null despite being effectively null? Think of it like melting something. You can do it with heat, you can do it with chemicals. Either way, it's melted. But just because something has been dissolved with chemicals doesn't mean you can't burn it, or that something burnt can't have something foul poured onto it. In this description, null is like burning away all axiom, but the Treyi's touch is acid. But the acid is still flammable, Observer Wu says, and Isma nods. So the tree scramble axiom, but still need it to live. Correct. But humans are normal-looking, despite evolving in that fire, yet are so unreliant on axiom that the Undaunted are one of the very few galactic organizations on friendly terms with the treaty. And Tri-technology is part of the packages sent to Earth. Because it's one of the astonishingly few technologies tested to and capable of being used without axiom, Isma says, I see, so if nothing else we do owe the Tree a debt for developing the technology that was sent to Earth. Speaking of, is this all you're doing with it? A few ships to ferry people out? It's not a bad idea, but considering how curious, ambitious, and prone to exploration humans are, I highly doubt the dauntless and the inevitable are the end of it. In fact, I would put a great deal of money on them, barely being the beginning. You are correct, but first there must be the political will behind things. And as things stand, there's a great deal more concern on the fact that the elites of society have been pushing too far. So while we likely have everything we need to have extrasolar colonies and cities, it may be a while yet. But it might not be a while yet. They could be doing so already. Maybe. We were able to cross 1/4% of the galaxy in 4 months, which means that roughly any point within a full percentile of the galaxy is effectively within human reach. 4 months of travel time isn't too bad. Over 700 times the speed of light. And he considers it not bad, Isma says in an amused tone. Everything is relative, Observer Wu says, before pausing and then looking at the Zedin woman cautiously. You're a little too good at putting people at ease. A necessary skill for both a mother and a hunter. If your children are relaxed, there is peace in the home. If your prey is relaxed, then your larder is soon to be full. All right, from what we're looking at, it seems the Durferlinet Company, and if this translation is right, it's the Reliable Company. Considering that most people's names are things like reliable, beautiful, or strong, if translated, that's not so odd, Miss Fallows notes. No, I suppose not, Hoagie says. Still, the Durferlinet Company does not have a license to clone fully developed people. Limbs and organs? Yes. Meat products and animals? Yes, but not people. Aren't people just a type of animal, though? Zachariah asks. We are, which is why they could put you together even if they weren't allowed. They had all the tools already ready, Hoagie says. Oh, so how much does it help to figuring out who's done everything and why? Well, it's another step on the road, and that's a good thing. But as to how many steps there usually aren't more than 3 or 4. The really careful types don't usually go beyond 5. Is that a lot of steps? Well, each step is another point where things change. For instance, if we start with you as the finished product, we find where you were made, that's Durferlinet. Then we find out who paid them. Then we find out if that's the person, and if it is, that's 3 steps. But if they had a proxy do it to keep them safe, that's 4 steps. But if they were really careful and had a proxy to pay the company to make you, then that's 5 steps. Most people rarely go beyond having a proxy hiring a proxy to do something, Hoagie says. So yeah, we're on step 2 of 3 to 5 of figuring things out. You think this is going to root everything out? Miss Fallows asks. Well, it'll get us stuck in if nothing else. Things aren't scattershot enough to suggest there's 15 different people doing the same thing, but not talking or anything like that. If it is a group, then the group knows each other, and once we get information on one of them, it should lead to the rest, Hoagie says. Which leads to the next point, Miss Fallows. Are you prepared to care for and nurture Zachariah here, provided that the Gullwins cannot? She takes a long look at the little boy she's absolutely towering over, and then smiles. He smiles back. I am, although what convinced you so quickly to let me take care of him? The fact that the Durferlinet do not have a license to clone people, and he is traced back to them, meaning that your part of the story with you being a victim is checking out so far. Couple that with a bit of information I've been having fed to me, Hoagie says, waving his communicator at her to show that he's been texting. Tells me you really are the word I cannot pronounce of Zachariah's brother, meaning trusted enough by his family to be trusted with him, especially if they're not in a state to take care of him. You're not even going to try and pronounce it? Knowing my luck, I'm liable to say something very rude while I try, so I'm going to avoid teaching a child such filth and just stick to galactic trade. But I already know the words, Zachariah protests. Well, then I'm not going to remind you. I'm an allegedly responsible adult after all, Hoagie says, and Miss Fallows snorts even as his communicator comes up with another notification and Zachariah points at it. He checks. Does the name Lorna Thausarian mean anything to you? No, Miss Fallows says. Well, she's the one that brought they money for Zachariah's cloning. I'll be taking a few looks at her, see if she's a proxy or responsible. But first is the step of your legal documents, little buddy. I hope you don't mind being registered as a Free Fleetborn. Why are you going this far for him? Someone needs to stand for the right thing. And oh, look at that. I'm here and able. Is that it? I could give you the cynical answer and say I'm earning allies. But really, I want to be the good guy. The rest is just perks, he says with a smile. That's so cool, Zachariah whispers. Yeah, and you can do it too, little buddy, Hoagie says, and something lights up in Zachariah's eyes. OOCS Into a Wider Galaxy, Part 199. The Buzz on the Spin. She slinks through the station in a desperate search for the target. Her employer had stressed just how insanely illegal the package was, and if she even looked inside, she was taking her legal future into her own hands. She was stretching plausible deniability past the point of actual use, and if she got caught, even if she knew nothing else, she would be getting at the very least the kind of fine that would take a century to pay off. On the other hand, her employer was giving her the impression as the kind of woman that would send assassins if you renege on a contract with her. She just has one massive problem with things. Her contact is dead, and she has no way of contacting her employer. Okay, that's 2 problems. She needs to figure out just what in the hell she's supposed to actually Holy hell, you're distracted, lady, a voice says from right behind her, and she jumps. Not something a Nagasha can normally do. Her tail slams into something as she spasms into the air, and then wraps around a pair of legs that refuse to play ball with the fact that Nagasha have one of the most powerful lower bodies in the galaxy. She turns and freezes. It's a man in close proximity, a man she was unfamiliar with, but some part of her told her he was extremely dangerous. Who are you? Why did you sneak up on me? I am with station admin and I didn't sneak up on you. I walked up in plain sight, but you're so wrapped up in your thoughts that you didn't see me. Well, duh, you were behind me. I also know you have some pits on the back of your neck. I was counting them as I waited for you to notice me, he says. Anyways, I need you to come with me. We need to talk. About what? About carnivores and Dorica Courier. He says, and she moves right into an invisible person that is as solid as a bulkhead, and she crumples against it. You know, I honestly expected this strange conspiracy to be a Yella all the way down. The deep, growling voice of the invisible man notes calmly. Well, not including station locals, it's Agela, Panceros, and Finsara. Honestly, the odder thing is that Tret aren't involved already. They're pretty much everywhere, the station administrator says as he helps her up. Kind of like vermin, the enormous figure says. Bit of an unfair comparison that, the admin states. Now, Missy, we need to talk about things happening. Your little package run has been figured out, and we just need a quick bit of information out of you, and then you can wash your hands of this. What? We just need you to finish your delivery, but with a modified package. Why? There are certain things we don't appreciate on this station, and while there's no real laws against it, no real laws out here at all, really, there are still consequences to getting caught doing them. And your boss lady has been caught, so we're not too happy with her. But how did you? She begins, and a distinctive case is held out. The original item is still inside, minus the actual prize that was in both expanded space and stasis inside it. Instead, we have an image of the package in there in stasis, and a locator beacon that will snap a picture of everyone there, transmit the location, and then self-destruct. What was it? What have people died for? Do you really want to know? Oh, no, not really, she says. Good woman. Hold it, she says before she takes the case. Yes? I might need protection after this. I'm willing to work with you, but if we do put you in protection, how many are going into protection with you? Just me. I'm on the outs with my family. Easily done, so long as you don't mind living on worlds for a bit. Why would I have a problem with that? Some people take issue with the weirdest things, and there are those that swear they can feel a difference between artificial and natural gravity, the man says. Anyways, if you have no issue with natural gravity, then after you make the drop, we can vanish you pretty thoroughly. All right, I figured I might be dodging assassins after everything went to shit. At least this way, I'm getting ahead of things. Atta girl, we'll get you out of here on the next ship out. If you'd like to make some extra cash, I have a package you can deliver to my brothers at your likely destination, the invisible man says. Brothers? Yes, brothers. What kind of package? Snacks and small gifts. I've picked up some new favorites, and I want to see how many of them share the same opinion on the food as I, the invisible man says, and she blinks. That's harmless to the point of trivial. The sort of thing that a newbie courier starts out with. That's fine, she says honestly. Great, it'll be your excuse to be elsewhere and be nice and legal, so if they start digging, it won't look like you're running. Not even an excuse. If the pay is good, I'd do it legit. You are one mercenary little lady, the admin says with a tinge of admiration, and she arches her back with a smile. The tail counts Tret. I'm bigger than you. Human, and no it doesn't. Waboom! The white flash of the incendiary explosion going off into a firestorm can be seen through his closed eyelids, and there is a sudden flash as he's now coated in sweat that rapidly helps cool him off. So you're as turned on as I am? Snarlmane asks in a husky tone. Actually, it's the heat. The sex smell is part of the human cooling method. It's called getting hot and bothered for a reason. I don't think it means quite that in that way. The saying showed up in like 1,000 languages, meaning the same general thing. It was just a lot more literal for my kind. So do you think we'll get in trouble for bringing this level of heat on the station? Javra asks. Hard to say. The last time this level of heat was on the station, the woman responsible was dead in short order. Giselle explains. Finish the story, Harold says. Wait, you know what happened? Undaunted were involved. Oh, that does explain it. Things do tend to spontaneously combust around you and yours. Jiria mocks him, and he snorts. No, it doesn't. He protests, and she gives him an even look. I work hard to set things on fire when they need to burn. But they do catch on fire, Jiria says, and he nods. I cannot confirm or deny the relative level of combustibility in my immediate vicinity, Harold says. You can all calm down, you know. The grasses here are specially bred to really resist heat. Is that why they look like they crossed with fungus? Harold asks. I'm surprised you didn't know. Isn't the whole thing about you and Herbert is that you're always on top of things? You need to pick and choose what you focus on. And considering that no one was drawing attention to the funky grass, I figured it wasn't too important, Harold says with a shrug. It's impossible to know everything. The important thing is to take in new information when it's presented and using it as you get it. I'm not sure if that's more or less scary. Someone who knows too much or someone who figures things out as it happens. Not afraid. You will be. You will. Shit, that's what they are doing. Now, what's the first point? Harold begins before his eyes widen. I've been so focused on the techniques that, damn, I need to make a call. He pulls out his communicator and puts in a saved number. After a bit, an Indian man shows up. Harold, is something wrong? It's the sword, isn't it? Harold asks. About what? The Portuguese, the strange phrasing, their references. What triggered you figuring it out? Why? Second page on your contract, you agreed to non-destructive and non-invasive tests while undergoing my duties. Yes, and this was one. Basically, we were making a large amount of references to pop culture and explaining nothing to you but everything to Herbert, to see if you still have some kind of link. Now, what triggered this revelation? What do you know? Only that it's a reference. It was triggered when I made one to Star Wars. Star Wars? And what triggered that reference? There was a recent tournament with plasma swords as the only permissible weapon, so it's still at least partially on the brain. Sounds like a solid no then. We've been making no Star Wars references with you or Herbert. I think it's safe to say there is no continual link between the two of you, and what link there was has been long severed. Okay, but please, what the hell have you been referencing? Metal Gear, a game series about corrupt and over-the-top militaries. The sword you were given was designed to copy one of the character's weapons. A Brazilian man wearing power armor whose whole thing is that he was fighting, but not really for a cause. The whole game he was in was about really powerful people and what and why they fight. A lot of the weird things they said to you were the lyrics of his theme song. They've been speaking a theme song at me, and we've been blasting it at Herbert to the point he's actually shot out a couple of speakers to shut us up. We've also made a point of teaching him Portuguese with the Brazilian dialect. Right. Okay. So can you stop now? Do we have to? This is funny. I'd appreciate a break from it. One last bit. We've played the song for Herbert so much that it's only fair you hear it at least once. Ooh, fine, but I want it to stop for at least a week. Deal. Now for the music of your people, the man says, and then heavy metal starts pouring out of the communicator. Then some rather familiar lyrics start belting out, and Harold sighs. Hoagie sighs as he enters the hive. So much of a mess, and he can't speed up its solving. It's frustrating when you want to sprint for the finish line, but it's a relay race and you can only do so much. Zachariah was being watched by no less than 5 people, only 2 of them conventionally visible, and was apparently doing well with Miss Fallows. He pulls off the bright shirt and hangs it up. He slips out of his pants and then peels out of the leg armor beneath, then pulls the pants back on. He stores it all and then disarms. The process takes a bit. He casually has 15 separate weapons on him, as well as a connected tattoo on the webbing of his thumb that let him draw out more weapons as he needed them, meaning he technically had over 1,000 fully functional weapons on him at all times. But it was a pile he shared with the rest of the undaunted station administration. Jabreza is waiting for him with a grin as he steps into his home proper. You know, most people consider a break time to relax, not time to unravel massive conspiracies and help children. She scolds him. It is relaxing, satisfying too. Hoagie protests as he kneels down to her level, and she wraps her arms around his neck before kissing him. How are they? Quiet, happy, well-fed, and most importantly, safe. Safe in the hive, safe in our home. Good. And it looks like that little boy is going to have his own hive soon. Good. Good. If the galaxy was more sensible, everyone would have them. It's dangerous doings going out the door. But there is food to grow, Hoagie says, and treasures to find, and foes to fight. They finish together. She snuggles up to him. A prize shouldn't blend so well with hives. You work too well with us. Are you sure there's no noble bee in your bloodline? No, I just get the idea of wanting home to be safe and sound. Hell, most human nations have stringent rules against trapping one's home due to the instinct to just kill intruders, Hoagie says. Good instinct. Yes, but apparently it's too far to set up a deadly weapon to cripple and potentially kill someone who's broken into your home and is trying to rob you. No, it's not, she protests. No, it's not. He agrees. Anyone in the hive without our express permission can be expected to be ejected in pieces. Does ash count as pieces? Jabreza asks. Only if a smear does too, Hoagie answers. OOCS Into a Wider Galaxy, Part 200. Reports from beyond the stars. She steals her nerve and walks out from behind the curtain. There is applause from the crowd, but Captain Lake is ready. Ready for the stupid questions, bad jokes, and the endless repetition. After all the court procedure and nonsense, especially after she revealed her orders and showed off the massive list of orders, the other soldiers got a huge amount of public outcry against her, and her crew had been redirected and amplified. So as she takes her seat opposite of the man behind the desk. Hello, Captain Lake. Are you still actually a captain after everything that's happened? The talk show host asks. It was never really something that interested her, so she doesn't really get the appeal. Well, I'm one of maybe 5 people in the entire solar system, or indeed in this sector of the galaxy that's trained to captain interstellar starships, and one of the only 2 with full experience navigating cruel space all the way to Earth. So if I'm no captain, then no one is, commissioned or otherwise. Speaking of commissioning, what do you think about the rumors of decommissioning the Chinese agents that returned as young teenagers have apparently gone through? Well, considering that the Chinese government is hanging on by its fingernails, it would be a very, very stupid thing for them to do. It would also be a perfect rumor for their enemies to spread because it would be very hard to disprove to the wider world and is a terrible smear if false. We in the West have a hard time telling apart Eastern features at times, and it would be very, very easy to get a gut reaction. That's a heck of a take, Captain. Any of it because of your own orders? Ever since mine were released, I was told in no uncertain terms that I had become politically radioactive. No one can afford being seen near me until the situation resolves itself further, which is why I'm both surprised and somewhat disappointed I keep getting invited to these shows. I thought you had more sense than to be seen with the liar, Lake, she says, putting up her hands and drawing the air quotes around the nickname she had been saddled with for a time. A giant interstellar tanker of precious metals, gemstones, and shipbuilding supplies with a demand that some passengers be sent on the next ship out changes a lot of minds. Do you know the actual value of all that gold? Considering that this singular bribe has quintupled the amount of gold on Earth, completely crashed the value of the precious metal, and would have bankrupted any nation still on the gold standard? I very much do understand. I don't think she intended to, but Speaker KyleKKent really saved me and my men with that move. Never thought I'd say this, but thank God for fiat currency. It stopped the global market from crashing through the floor. The host says, and Lake nods. It's outright weird too. The galaxy at large uses a precious metal system like the gold standard for their own currency, but we only survive their generosity because we don't. I guess it really is, as you've been saying, the host says, and Emily resists the urge to roll her eyes. It's really, really big, what? They both say, and there's laughter from the audience. It's also really well resourced. I've been given permission to watch the messages that have been sent back that aren't labeled as private or important, and seeing what some of the boys did, Oh boy, I know that no one expected it to be a woman's galaxy, but knowing that there are wizards too? Speaking of, how did you take the news of the rapid expansion after you had left? Tempted to go back into the stars? Maybe someday, but at the moment I'm working on myself a touch. Getting life here on Earth sorted before I think about strapping myself into those railgun pyramids they're making to get people into orbit. Not fond of roller coasters? The host asks. Just because some random guy said something is like a roller coaster, and people who have no idea what he's talking about agree with him, doesn't mean it's like a roller coaster. Then how are they different? You mean beyond the fact that you actually have a comfortable seat and are expected to not scream? Biting the pillow? Don't be crude. There's also the fact that a lot of roller coasters are badly maintained carnival rides, and multi-directional shuttle launching facilities are at the bleeding edge of technology and cared for with a religious fervor. Being paid a lot to do it tends to do that, the host says, and the crowd gives off a laugh that Emily is positive has been prompted. Imagine that. Paying someone a lot of money gets a lot of enthusiasm. What a funny concept that is, she remarks, and there's some more authentic laughter from the crowd. But she's positive a good chunk of it was still prompted. Which reminds me, I did have a whole whackload of questions from our audience to pull out of this here hat. The host says, pulling out a big and thematic top hat with slips of paper stick out of it. But when I was going over them to make sure we weren't getting something too bad, I would. As she was told to do earlier, she reaches and grabs one of the slips of paper sticking out the top. Sure enough, it's inappropriate, and she now has the choice of dismissing the question entirely or reading it out loud and challenging it. She might not be an undaunted, but you don't cross the galaxy by being faint of heart. Did you need to get breast reduction therapy before returning to Earth? She reads out loud and glances over at the crowd. A few of them are snorting before anything can be prompted. The host puts on an over-the-top, surprised expression, and Emily shrugs. You know what? I'm going to let you all think and dream about it. Really? You're not afraid of some randy young sort deciding that you did and, well, you know. Hey, if they want to imagine me as their idea of an ideal woman, then they're going to do it with or without my permission? Tell me when I can. No, this is when my lawyer would start screaming at me, and I will continue down this path no further. Emily replies, and there is a massive laugh from the audience. Probably the smart thing to do. After all, if you've been speaking to your lawyers enough that the ghosts of lawsuits future are visiting you, then you know your life has gone off in interesting directions. Are you implying that there's a ghost of lawsuits present? Unless you're about to bring out someone in a suit, then, Emily asks, and then pauses as a man in a tan suit walks out from behind the curtain, and she freezes. She wasn't told about this. The host is laughing at the expression on her face, and she gives him a scowl. Who is this, and why is he here? She demands. Technically, he's a relative of yours, the host says, and Emily looks at him again. The only thing I see in common with him is that we're both human. And considering Trets are basically humans, minus a few organs and some muscle density, that's not even a sure thing. Actually, we're technically related. I'm you sister's husband's second cousin. Leslie's second cousin-in-law? Emily asks incredulously. Then there is the sound effect of mechanical and labored breathing, and she sighs before leaning back in her chair. Of course, Star Wars joke. Can we get off Star Wars and Star Trek references? I know they're the big ones, but can we try something like Firefly or Babylon 5? Stargate or Warhammer are also on the table. I find your lack of faith disturbing, the lawyer says, and Emily gives him a look. All right, excuse me a moment. I need to engage in some family bullying. She says, standing up, and the man takes a step back. She takes a few steps forward, and he backs up with each one before breaking and running. Yeah, that's what I thought. And what were you going to do to him? I was going to put him in a headlock and see what wrestling move came to mind first, Emily admits as she takes her seat again. Why is it that even the ones who came back from the wider galaxy so upfront and bold? We were selected and trained to be just like this. Don't blame me for using the training I was given. It's like expecting you to suddenly stop walking and... Oh, wait. Is that why you haven't gotten up yet? He stands and adjusts the buttons on his suit. Try again, ma'am. Oh, so baby can stand? But can he walk? Can he dance? Emily asks, and on cue, the man starts to dance. She shakes her head. So much of these improv shows are all scripted to the nines. Still, it's a way to step around a lot of legal nonsense, obeying the very letter of the rulings, but thoroughly violating the spirit. Abort launch. Final scan has detected a fault in the rail, she says as she looks over the command room. One of the technicians switches away from the latest interview with Captain Emily Lake as his break ends. In or out of accepted tolerances, the pilot asks. Of course, calling the man a pilot is generous. He's just generally steering the ship as it gets launched out of a long cannon. Out, otherwise we would have let you go, she snaps. All right, engaging docking clamps and powering down, the pilot says with a sigh. None of that. After what happened in India, do you really want a repetition here? She demands. No, Commander, I don't, but I did want to deliver the supplies today. No real day or night up in orbit, soldier, so technically it's always today, she says. With all due respect, Commander, that's a load of nonsense. The pilot answers. Powered down, I'm leaving the shuttle. She turns to the left window and sees a small and sleek little ship. A lifter drives up to it and the door opens to let the pilot out. Even at the distance where he's more akin to a stick figure, she can still see him slouching in disappointment. Hey, Commander, this isn't due to budget cuts, is it? With the shuffling of the parties and so many people being forced out. Our budget is shining bright. There is a legitimate fault in the rail that's big enough to damage the shuttle. I don't want you ripping a wing off it and plowing into a mountain, she replies. Copy that. Where on the rail is it? The pilot asks. Left rail, section 42 of 50. It's why it took until the last second for us to find it. One of the technicians answers. We'll get it replaced and put that section into repair. If we put some hustle in, then we can still launch within safe tolerances today. It'll be a bit of a long shot, but well within safety standards, she says. Woo! The pilot cheers. Comm is still on. Oh, damn, the pilot says, and there's a brushing sound. That was still on, she says, and there's the sound of a bit off curse before it closes properly. There's some light chuckling around the room. All right, people, you know the routine. Replace that section of rail. Move it, go, go, go. At her command, everything starts moving, and she nods before her phone starts vibrating. A text. Great, just great. Everyone, you know what to do. I need to take a call. She then moves back into her office and waits for a few minutes before the expected call comes in. Base Commander Freeman? The suit on the other end says. She recognizes him as Quartermaster Renault. She officially outranks him, but he's the rubber stamp on the money being sent to her base, so many would argue it's the other way around. Hello, Quartermaster. Is something wrong? Not with you. In fact, several campaigners have promised increased funding, Renault says. With this in place, you can get a pay raise for yourself and all your soldiers. Care to hear my opinion on these matters? I do. It's fucking disgraceful that it took this level of political fires being lit to get proper funding for space exploration. We should have been on Mars when I was a little girl, she says. Yes, it is. Imagine how much of a mess we'd be in if not for the, what's it called again, null? If we weren't in the middle of what the galaxy considers Chernobyl, we could have been invaded at any time, Renault says before grinning. But this isn't the end of it. The eggheads in research just came up with a new potential rail system. It's vaguely pyramid-shaped to give it stronger support, and with 4 sets of rails as a future proofing for when there's more infrastructure in orbit. They designed something with eyes to the future? Are you sure these are actual scientists? Commander Freeman asks. Considering what we've learned from the samples sent back. Right, yeah. Actual alien bodies and tech refusing to work? I can't be the only one that thinks it's kind of bullshit, right? It is bullshit, ma'am, but it's consistent bullshit. Like higher math, it adds up. But it really looks like it shouldn't, Renault says, and Commander Freeman nods. Ma'am? One of the technicians says, opening the door. I assume this is important. We're going to have to delay until tomorrow. Mandatory checks on the ship's airlock seals found a few minor hiccups that are nonetheless hard to get to, he says, and she nods. On a ship as small as the shuttle was, there were only so many redundancies you could put in, so you had to double, triple, and quadruple check everything, just in case. Get to it then, she says.